Well, thanks everybody for coming. I really appreciate you all showing up this evening, and I'd like to get to know you a little bit better. How many of you are currently consultants? About half. Okay. And of the people who raise their hands in consulting, how many have been doing it longer than 2 years? Wow, most of you, most of you. How many longer than 5? Okay, less of you. And how many longer than 10? A couple of you. Okay, well good. What I'm going to do is try and give you some background and information about how to be successful at in consulting. And for those of you that didn't raise your hand and you're thinking about getting into consulting, or if these unfortunate times afford you that opportunity, at least this will give you something to think about so you can be as successful as possible. I'm going to make this as tangible as I can. When working on the talk, go ahead. Yeah, sure. And Doug, or you can tell me how best to do that, but I can make them available
on the website.
Perfect. Yeah, I'd be happy to share everything. So the talk's going to be tangible. It's about a real experience in a real consulting company, things that worked and things that didn't work. And I must mention to all of you, you may or may not have this lens, but I had a particular lens after I left Bose to start a consulting company. And I wanted it to be successful, and I wanted to grow it, and I wanted to have a team of people. So rather than just an individual, I wanted to have a team. So you'll see the slides have oriented really strongly around being financially successful. That was my objective. You may not have that as an objective as a consultant. You may just want to be able to control the hours that you work. You may be wanting to be able to be independent and pursue your own dreams. You want to be maybe a little bit more in control of your destiny. So you'll have to take in mind and accept the fact that this is one example. It's not the way to make a successful consulting company. It is a way. I'm going to give you a history of a consulting firm that I founded in 1990 called Product Development Consulting. They're still in business. It's run by Sheila Mello. She's headquartered down in State Street. I sold it, and I went on to investment banking and doing things in financial engineering. So I've kind of pursued a different life. But this was a very successful firm that was created in 1990. Couple things. Notice the naming, PDC. I wanted to name the consulting firm very specifically. And I think if you're going to think about consulting, and I'm going to describe the difference between contracting and consulting a little bit later. But if you want to go into consulting, having a niche is really, really, really important. Narrow is a good thing. The narrower, the better. Don't try and be a generalist. There are a lot of really smart middle managers. You don't want to be one of those. You want to be something very special. And we put a stake in the ground by going after product development consulting. And basically, it was oriented around process improvement. That's all we did, is we improved the process of developing products. I'm going to touch on these 5 points. I'm going to talk a little bit about my background in forming the firm, the strategic intent. The most important message of this talk is going to be about marketing is not sales. And if there's one thing I want you to leave with is a deep understanding of the difference between marketing and sales when it relates to selling professional consulting services. I want to talk specifically about our marketing strategy that worked very well for us, and then finally some action implications and discussion. So our focus here, which I think will resonate well in the room, is experience-based management consulting. And why it'll resonate well is this: we weren't like a McKinsey or a Bain or a BCG where we hire a bunch of smart young people and bring them in and charge a lot of money. These are people who've actually done the work. So my consulting firm all consisted of CTOs or vice presidents of engineering. So we all really knew what we were talking about. So that's why we called it experience-based. And it was focused on the product development process. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk to you about what made this firm successful. First of all, I'd like to communicate to you something really important here, and that is everybody in this room can be successful in consulting. No doubt about it. No doubt about it. Here's a curve from a researcher in Scientific Genius, Keith Dean Simonton, and what it does is it shows a curve basically that shows intelligence and productivity. Essence of it is if you've got a little bit more than a room temperature IQ, that's all you need. That clears the stakes. And the only difference between someone being successful in consulting and not successful in consulting is the ability to get business. It's the only thing. It's the only barrier you're going to have, and I'm going to talk about how you can get business during this discussion. So, and the notion that he found in looking at Scientific Genius, and it's a terrific book, is that basically once you've cleared the threshold in terms of intelligence, there's other things that really enable scientific greatness, and I believe that enable success in consulting. Just to give you a little background in terms of my background, that led to this. So I was in school for about 6 years, and then I was at Bose for about a dozen years, and then consulting about 6 years. And this particular profile describes the work after about 6 years of consulting. So it kind of captures a snapshot at that time. And the ability to market and sell is what it takes. You all have the mental capacity to do it, and I guarantee you can be successful if you try, if you can master that component of it. So one of the things that was absolutely instrumental to my success in consulting was really being mentored by a great thinker and leader, and that was Dr. Bose. So when I went to MIT, I studied under Dr. Bose and taught in his acoustics class. And he spent an enormous amount of time with me while I was at Bose. He was one of the few people who was both a consummate technologist and a marketeer, and he really understood both very deeply. One of the things that I learned working at Bose was innovations can occur in marketing. Innovations can occur in marketing. What does this mean? Well, basically, if you look at coming up with a product idea, you may come up with a product idea and find it very difficult to sell. And one of the things that Dr. Bose would do, I worked on the headphones, for example. Headphones are $300. I mean, they're insanely expensive. And how are you going to sell those? Well, it's very hard to sell them at retail because people won't demonstrate them for you. And so what Bose pioneered was direct distribution model to enable the products to be demonstrated, or so you could experience them and return them if you don't like them. He would innovate distribution channels in order to really get his incredibly innovative products to market. That was true of the wave radio. Very expensive radio, but he knew if he sold it at Target, it wouldn't be listened to. And so he would simultaneously innovate technologies and marketing channels. So when you think about how you're going to be a successful consultant or contractor, you have to really innovate about how you're going to market yourself. You need to think as much about how you're going to market yourself as the practice in which you learn to stay sharp and sell. And the thing that Dr. Bose asked me when I was leaving, I told him that I wanted to start a business. And his question was, can you sell? And it is critical for you to be able to sell yourself in consulting. It's not difficult. Selling isn't cold calling, but basically it's the ability to find, qualify a customer, and then close on that customer. And every CEO, every person that runs a business is selling. Every startup, the CEO's primary job is a salesman. And so one of the things that you have to do is be able to sell. It's not cold calling, and I'll talk about that. It's not cold calling, but it's the ability to close a piece of business. It's the ability to ask simple questions. So one of the things he asked me is, can you sell? I felt I could. One of the things that he talked to me about is emotional intelligence and really listening to people and understanding what they have to say. When I was a student of his class, he would do the most amazing thing when a student would ask a question. He would listen to what the question was asked. He'd process it and map it into the question the person really wanted to ask but couldn't articulate it. He'd formulate an answer, and then he would post-process it into a way of phrasing so that the person who asked the inarticulate question could understand it. And he was really, really great at doing this. And I learned two things. One, about really understanding people, what they have to say. And the second is answering them in ways that they can understand. And this was a really important thing that I learned from Dr. Bose, really being in tune with people and understanding their innate desires and their motivations. One of the things about consulting is, and those of you that consult now really know this, is that one of the biggest reasons that people hire consultants is what? Why do people hire consultants or contractors? Okay, that could be true. That's not the answer I'm looking for, but save money is possible. Sometimes they're expensive. But you're right, sometimes to get around certain things, they do that. That can be true, and that always is true.
Sometimes they want to reduce the risk and transfer to you.
That's true. That can, the blame. I'm not hearing the answer I'm looking for. Yeah?
I would imagine it's done fairly often as a political move. You bring in your consultant who has a lot of prestige, and therefore your idea moves forward in the company as opposed to someone else's idea.
That can happen, true. That's a good answer.
They want someone to bounce ideas off of.
Sure. Outside perspective. Okay. Pardon me?
They can't do it themselves.
That's another reason. You're still not getting it.
They don't want to hire somebody in-house.
No. Again, that could be. That's a good answer. You're not getting the answer I'm looking for.
Fixed projects?
No. Good. These are, by the way, all of these are correct answers. They're not the answer I'm looking for. Say it more loudly. Exactly. That is exactly the answer I was looking for. The primary motivation for people who hire consulting is to solve pain, to reduce pain. Consultants reduce pain. They do all the things everybody else had a correct answer. But the way I view it and what I do in understanding marketing and sales is I manage the pain message. What is your pain? And you listen very, very carefully to what they're saying. And really listen to what they're saying, and clients will tell you exactly what they want to have fixed. And then you can take your expertise, the outside knowledge you have, the fixed-based contracting period, the money that you could potentially save them, the third-party credibility, the political things that you can provide, the buffering that you can provide. All those things are beneficial. But it's my very strong belief the motivation of most managers when they hire a consultant is to cure, reduce, or remedy, eliminate pain. And careful listening to understand really what their pain is about is really important. Take notes. Really, really pay attention. And one of the things that I recommend in this whole notion of listening, when I write a proposal, and usually I respond in a letter form proposal, 1 or 2 pages, they're pretty simple responses. I actually use verbatim words from clients. So if someone is potentially hiring me and they'll say catchy words or phrases that are unique to them, unique expressions, I put that in the proposal. That does a couple things. First of all, it tells them that you listen. Second, it reinforces that, in fact, you're using the same language. And the third point is it's empathy. So listening and realizing that many times what you're doing is you're coming in to reduce pain is really an important way. And if you have that mindset and you really listen, you can, in general, address what their needs are, and they'll tell you. So these are some of the clients that we had. Doug mentioned a few. So there are some clusters that we had. One cluster that we had was office equipment. Another was medical technology. And a third, believe it or not, were utilities. So one of the things that I would recommend if you're considering going into consulting is identify some industries, either that you came out of or that you could really get good at and market to. And this is important because the experience you gain in some industries really are powerful marketing tools, because people often evaluate consultants by the client list that they have. And you'll notice some things up here. For example, there's no pharma. We didn't do any pharma work. Pharma has a different language, you know, the FDA approvals and the clinical trials, and we never got any pharma jobs and didn't pass critical mass, and so that's not on this particular list. So the notion of the client list and thinking about that is pretty important, and you also want to think about, well, obviously, where's the pain? You know, where are people having problems? Where do people have budget? And where do you have expertise? Now, I had a lot of expertise in consumer electronics, but very few of my consulting engagements were in consumer electronics. There aren't that many firms doing consumer electronics here. So focus on segments in your customer list as you develop, and then market to those. See, Bill, you presented some charts of events that were coming on, I guess, earlier in the presentation, all these speaking events. Well, besides those that are presented, there's industry events. And so if you think about going into an industry, maybe there's a utilities conference that deals with software development for utilities, or power monitoring or power measurement. You have a skill there? Speak there. Now, this is a pretty important chart. I'm going to talk about numbers at this point, because a lot of people ask, what should my rate be, and how should I approach this? So this is my 2 cents on this. First, I would like to separate two, and so we can have a uniform language. May not agree with it, but what I'd like to do is define 2 terms, consultant and contractor. And they're different in my viewpoint. So a consultant is an individual with, in general, a unique specialty. And a consultant would be an individual that has a deep specialty in a particular area. For example, in our consulting firm, we had market-driven product definition. So it was a unique way of translating customer needs into product requirements using interview guides and a system very similar to CQM, KJ notes, affinity diagrams, and very, very particular methodology that was used. It was a unique specialty. And there are other examples of unique specialties. In the UI field, I'm sure there are people with different paradigms for approaching usability or customer-centered design that are very unique and their own proprietary property. Contrast that to a contractor. And a contractor is an individual, I would say, that would fulfill a functional role. So in other words, a contractor comes in and it's an engineer level 3 doing ASIC design, and you're a temporary worker and you come in and you fill that particular role. So you'd be doing a functional role in an organization. You'd fit into a job description, working as part of the management team. So I described consultant and contractor in these 2 ways. Now let's talk about the rates, because people often wonder, well, how much should I charge for my time? How much is my time worth? And depending on how you want to strategize and position your contracting and consulting work, you really take a fork in the road. And doing the contracting can result in a faster ramp. In other words, you kind of do that, you know it already, you can look in Craigslist or a job board, fill that role, jump in, you're paid for a duration of time, and then when your gig is over, you leave and you may look for another assignment, or you may go from contract to permanent. So it's faster ramp. A consultant, on the other hand, has a higher rate. And the reason it's not a faster ramp is often you need to develop that intellectual property. What is unique about what you do that allows you to have a special role? And also now you have to find people who want that special role. So it's a more complicated process, but the difference in rates is vast. So consultants in general have higher rates than contractors. Many people in this room may fall in this category. It's my advice to the best degree you can, don't do this and do this. Again, you know, I was wired for income, and so I went naturally here. I was willing to wait 6 months for revenue, because if I focused in this area, I'd get much higher revenue differential. I'll talk about that in just a minute. So if you go on the contracting route, the math is real simple, and the way I translate it is just take your salary in 100,000 or units of thousand and apply that per hour. So if your salary was $100,000, I would target $100 an hour. And it's real simple math. You may not get that, but that's what I would start at. Normally people would think, well, you know, if I charge $50 an hour and there's roughly 50 weeks in a year and 40 hours in a week, that's $100,000. So why wouldn't I charge $50 an hour, right? Because that's about what a $100,000 salary would be. Well, there are two big factors that come into play that are important in setting your rates. The first is billability. And the metric for billability for most consulting firms that are large is 65%. So if you look at all the big management consulting firms, and we've got a guy here from a design firm in the back, are you paying attention? So what's your billability rate for your firm? What percent?
I don't know.
You don't know?
It's not 100%.
What do you think it is? Guess. Just give us a range. It's not 100%. Okay, is there anyone else from a multi-person firm in the audience? 70%. Okay.
Would that be in consulting?
Yeah. And I'm not saying 65 is the right number, but it's a reasonable number, and firms do their economics around that, because there's a time that you need to spend writing proposals that you don't get paid for doing, and there's times you don't get the jobs, and there's ramp-up time, and you've got to take some seminars to get educated, and it works out to be 65, 70%. So this is a good number for billability. And then you have to factor in benefits. You know, you're now paying both sides of FICA. So you're paying both halves of Social Security when you're self-employed. You've got to pay health insurance, which is about $20,000 for a family. And there's time off. You know, you'd like more than 2 weeks off a year. So if you look at the factors between benefits and billability, the gross up is about 2 times. And that's why I came with the notion of not $50 an hour, but the target is $100 an hour. Because if you charge $100 an hour and use these typical metrics, then you'll, at the end of the year, over an average year, have the salary you achieve, which is about $100,000. So the simple rule of thumb in contracting is you just take your annual salary in 1,000 units and just apply that per hour. Real simple rule of thumb. So those of you that are contractors who are out there, is that close to how you set your rates? Yes? 1 person? 2 people are nodding yes? 3? Yeah. So this is, pardon me? Gross up. In other words, if you have these 2 factors and multiply them together, you have to gross up the rate by about a factor of 2. In other words, you would think working at $50 an hour would give you $100,000 a year, but no, you have to pay for other things that your company would pay for. So to get this equivalent in salary, you have to gross up the hourly rate by a factor of 2. On the other hand, being a consultant, you can have a higher rate. And I'll give you a metric. So when I was doing the peak of consulting, my rate was $5K a day. So, and this rate would be $800 a day. So 5K, $800. Huge difference. And furthermore, when it comes to rates and becoming a consultant, I'll give you some really important advice and a really good book to read, which is called $1 Million Consulting. Any of you read that? One person has. Terrific book. One of the things it talks about in $1 Million Consulting, which I highly recommend, is don't charge by the hour. Don't charge by the day. Charge by the project. Don't charge by the hour. Don't charge by the day. Don't have a rate. Charge by the project. Do it fixed price. But the whole notion is you can really transform the revenue that you get by charging by the project. It's not ripping off anyone because it's fixed price, and they can, the person that's hiring you can compare you to other solutions. How big is their pain? How big is their pain? If their pain is really big, it's really worth a lot of money for you to come in and consult. So depending on the way you'd like to approach it, you should think about whether you want to be a consultant and a contractor. If income is important to you, this is what I would recommend. But it requires time, requires a unique specialty, and it requires some creativity to find your clients, because you're not just responding to an ad in Craigslist. So the marketing is more difficult.
So the numbers below are actually for contracts.
Exactly, exactly. See, this is the answer for consulting. And the best way to think about it is speaker's fees. So someone like Clinton will get $250,000 for an hour. So that's why I really mean the sky is the limit. It's because speaking fees. Tom Peters is, yeah, he's a $50K guy, or is it $250? I don't know.
He would never he would never charge for a part of the day. So full day fee is close to an hour.
Yeah, there we go. There we go. Any other questions on the rate page? This is a pretty important page. Sure.
Sometimes contractors make up rates based on what the market dealers are supposed to, fixed day of dividing the expenses. What is your opinion on such a way of fixing?
It really depends on how eager you want the work. What I would do is I would attach an opportunity cost to my time. And if they didn't clear the opportunity cost of my time, I wouldn't take the work. And I would be good about it. I would say, I know some really good people who will do it for less, and here's their phone numbers, and you can call them. Because I'm very much oriented towards clients, really helping make them successful. So I think you need to assign an amount for yourself. And depending on the environment right now, and times are tough, you may want to work for less than this if you've got a competitive situation. That's why I'm really urging you to come up to this category, be above this blue line, because if you're above the blue line, you are unique property. You aren't compared against someone's hourly wages. And that's a really important objective.
It just seems to me like if you are doing fixed price consulting, you have to do a fair amount of groundwork to figure out what the project is.
You do.
In order to come up with that fixed price.
Yep.
And so how do you handle that? Do you bill for any of that time?
Excellent question. In those engagements, I divide them into two phases, an assessment phase and then a project phase. And so use the assessment phase as a way the client pays you to estimate the project. And they get value from it. So you would deliver a plan and a blueprint for how you would do it. You get some insight into the scope. But to break it into two phases, do an assessment and then do the second phase.
You said that one of the issues in doing consulting, which allows you to charge a higher rate, besides having a unique specialty with finding clients.
Right.
You sort of skipped over that step.
It's coming. And so that's the most important part. That's going to come. It'll come in a couple charts, so I'll get to that. Go ahead.
Corollary question to one that was just asked, I think, is what do you do around writing a proposal about for a fixed cost in a competitive situation? So if you have that assessment phase, there's an assumption that there's some client has some skin in the game that you're paying to do that assessment phase. Did you encounter situations where you really have to do that groundwork up front that's will compete against other consultants, or did they already approach you?
Yeah, really, really good question. I would say 95% of our work, or 90%, we were sole sourced. We never got into beauty contests. And that's a really good question. If you're going for work, ask if they're in fact looking at other consultants. It's a really important question because that, for me, modulates how much work I'd put into the proposal process and your odds of winning it. So just simply ask. And another really great question to ask, and this is kind of getting into the sales question, is, do you have a budget? Real simple question. Do you have a budget for consulting? And can you tell me what it is? Or usually they won't, but can you give me a range? But if they don't have a budget, it's like, and the third, or another really great question to ask is, who besides yourself has to sign off on this proposal? Who besides yourself has to sign off on it? Do you have a budget? And who besides yourself have to sign off on it? Because of course the person you're seeing is very, very important. And the marketing that we did was actually to the influencer and not the economic buyer. So we had to ask that question a lot. So this was our metric to become a recognized authority in product development. A metric was frequent invitations to bid and win on consulting opportunities by leading developers of Fortune 500 companies. And our target was one request per proposal or one project per month. A couple things are really important about it. It was really clear what our target was. And if you're going into consulting, figure out what your goal is. What are you trying to be? A lot of you are obviously from the human interface community, but you may have a unique twist on this. You should have what the target is in terms of a strategy. And we really wanted to be the first top-of-mind consultant in this area. This was our metric. This is what we're after. Why did we say Fortune 500 companies? Does anyone know? There's another really important lesson in this talk. You got it. Big companies have big projects and big budgets. So we went after big companies. Absolutely. It's the same amount of work to qualify for a big company. Doing essentially the same thing, and in general the problems are much harder and you get paid much more to do it. So it's absolutely a target-rich environment to go after the bigger companies. Again, if economics is important to you, I'd urge you to go there. Working for small companies, I did a lot of startup work. It's very satisfying because you can really make a huge impact, but the remuneration is different.
You keep saying we.
Yeah.
How many people were you at the stage?
That's a good question. So at this stage, 6 years into it, there were 10 of us.
When you made those choices, recognized and created this metric,
Yep.
how many people were that?
10.
Okay.
10 is when we kind of clarified this objective. And the 10 would be about 7 consultants and 3 office people, more or less, something like that. Yeah.
So what's the typical length of a project?
So we had 2 kinds of engagements. One was the product definition that we would do, and that would be 4 months. And the other kind of engagements we would do is we'd put in a product development life cycle, so software life cycle, something like that. And depending on the scale of the company, that would be between 6 and 24 months. So those would be the range of the projects. And the assessment phase would typically, you asked a question about assessments, be typically 6 weeks, something like that.
What's product definition?
Product definition is when you determine the customer requirements of a product. So you define the product requirements. So translating the voice of the customer into a product requirements document.
I was wondering if you ever tried out particularly like maybe startup or smaller companies, a royalty payment model.
No.
Any thoughts on that?
Do it at your own risk.
Yeah.
A royalty of what?
Well, it's
Yeah.
It's a high risk approach.
But I did one, so one of our bigger engagements, this was for Apple, and Apple was one of our biggest clients. We did the Apple development process, ANPP, Apple New Product Process. And it was we worked with a brilliant manager, and she said, you're going to be paid, we're going to hold back 15% based on a performance metric. And what it was we had to measure whether we were making change management throughout the Apple New Product organization. And so we had a metric, this sounds unbelievably goofy, but it worked, is how many status reports use the new phase name nomenclature in them. And it had to be 90% of the roughly 60 programs that Apple was doing at the same time. And what was amazing is that we trained the wrong people. And we saw the metric go up, and then it went down. And we trained the project managers, but it's the project coordinators that actually do the schedules. So putting in a metric was very useful because it really embedded and deeply seeded the process. It wasn't a royalty, however. It was based on a performance metric. But also you might ask, would you ever take stock? And that's a mess. And the problem is that you have to pay taxes for it if it's a grant, or you can take options, but it's deferred compensation. And I would advise you to stay away from that.
You said project could be 6 to 24 months. Of the 10 of you, how many people is that, and are you there full-time?
Good question. Okay. And by the way, this is the kind of work we did, so it may or may not relate to the kind of work you did. So I would typically have 6 or 8 clients simultaneously. I worked hard. And I would have 4 that would be major clients, and I would be on site 2 or 3 days every other week. And typically there would be 1 or 2 of us. So does that answer your question? Yeah, so I put on, one of the reasons I sold the business is I was traveling too much. I would travel 200,000 miles a year, and it just got to be not so much fun. It was too much work. But what we did is we were real. One of the things we insisted on this kind of work is that the client company assign a dedicated person to work with us. And we told the client company how many people they needed to devote to the project to make it successful. It's really, really important because you need someone on site because you're not on site every day if you want to do this kind of work. Now again, if you're contracting and UI design and you join a project team, you're going to maybe be there on site every day for 6 months. It's going to be very different. This is the kind of consulting that we did. Okay, this is the most important chart in the presentation, and I'll talk this and a couple more. So consultants and people feel that sales is a terrible word. It's like a 4-letter word. It's a dirty word. You don't say sales. You don't say I'm selling someone. Instead, they say, well, I'm marketing. I'm marketing. Well, no, you're selling. Really, there's a very huge difference between marketing and sales. So, and there's some analogies. Marketing is to sales as research is to development. And in other words, marketing is planting a long-term seed. It's very future-oriented. Selling is about today. It's about a transaction. So marketing is in the future. Sales is today. Another important distinction is marketing is typically one-on-many, and sales is one-on-one. Marketing is one-on-many. Sales is one-on-one. You write a book, it's one-on-many. Selling, when you're negotiating a contract, is one-on-one. Marketing creates demand, and sales fulfills it. Important thing about if you want to be a consultant is you need to create demand. That's the most important thing you need to do, is create demand. And in sales, you don't need to do cold calling. People call you. And at the peak of our consulting company, I would not take business cards. I would hand people my business card and say, if you need work done, please call me. I was too busy, but if you want something done, that's a hurdle, please call me. And that's the goal. In other words, to become so recognized, to have something so important that people reach out to you. That's the goal, is to create the demand. And marketing makes sales real simple because if people want you, they've identified the pain. They are in pain. They believe you can solve this pain. They reach out to you. So sales is simply order taking at that point. And so marketing is not sales. And my recommendation and the real purpose of this talk is to urge you, if you go into consulting, think about how you're going to market your practice. Don't think about sales. Think about how you're going to market it. Now I'm going to recommend how much time you might want to think about it. So this was taken during a 7-month period. I highly recommend time logging software. I use a program called Timeslips. There are many out there. Highly recommend time logging software, especially if you do multiple clients or in any way are charging any way related to your time. The reason being is you forget how much time you actually spent. The other thing is that good time tracking software rounds up. So the minimum increment is typically 10 minutes. So if you make a 2-minute call, it rounds up to 10 minutes. Standard practice. Lawyers use it. It's a very standard way of tracking time, and I highly recommend an automated tool for doing that. I guarantee just by doing that, you probably bill 15 or 20% more. You really do forget stuff. I do. Most people do. But this shows how much time I would spend when I was working. So I worked on average 65 hours a week. That was my typical week. And of that week, I spent 10 hours of marketing. And marketing is not calling customers. It's not writing proposals. It's writing speeches. It's writing articles. It's doing research. It's pushing forward the field. It's talking with academics. So this is really an important and probably the minimum amount of time. Certainly when I was starting out consulting, it was more like 80% of my time was in marketing, where marketing also include research. So marketing should be a material fraction of your time, and there's not a single iota of this that is in any way related to sales. So, what do I recommend? Speaking. Speaking, speaking, speaking. Highly recommend speaking for a bunch of good reasons. You're selling yourself. You're not selling a product, you're selling you. And when people are in the audience looking at you, potentially who might be hiring you, they're able to assess, is this person going to fit in our culture? Are they articulate? Do they know what they're talking about? Can they field questions? Would they be fun to work with? Articles don't do that. Articles are good, but not as good as speaking. Also, consulting it's hard to evaluate people unless you really meet them in a face-to-face environment. And so speaking is a great way in which you can really kind of sense out a person. It's as much chemistry as content. And the delivery of consulting services is a personal thing. It's one person working with another person. It's a very personal kind of relationship. And speaking is a way in which you get to know the person. And typically, the speaking that I would do, and I'll talk a little bit about the venues that we did, you're going to have to rethink about those, would be in national venues. So typically, they would be national conferences. So although I never spoke at the national or global international CHI meeting, that would be an example of the kind of venue that I would talk at. Here are the kinds. So industry conferences, so I mentioned, we had some focus areas, for example, office equipment and medical technology. We would speak at industry conferences in those areas. We would speak in sponsored seminars. So there are these companies called seminar providers, just like there's a PDS series here, where there are professionals putting on seminars all around the country that are really looking for qualified speakers. Seminars are a really great way of getting jobs. Conferences are much better because in a conference you give a high impact message, presentation in 1 hour, usually to a larger audience. Seminar typically here might be 30 people for a whole day. So this is highly preferred. And by the way, I recommend never, ever selling at these things. Never be blatant about selling. Give people as much value and information as you possibly can. When people ask you questions about benchmarks, industry practices, give them everything you know. Don't hold anything back. Give them everything. There's often this sense that consultants, their knowledge is so secret, you should hold everything back. Don't do that. And also, the people who put on these conferences, they're very bipolar about consultants, because on one side, consultants can deliver the best presentations because they do this professionally, know how to give a good talk. But on the other hand, so many times they turn people off, because they're selling so much, or they don't give people tangible examples, or don't answer the questions. So one of the things that's important when you work at these is don't sell, and really try and give people the benefit, as much benefit as possible. Society talks are great. Business development forums are also very good. So one of the things that you really ought to look at is speaking in terms of marketing your consulting and contracting. Sure.
Think of organizations like Toastmasters, for example, that
yeah, to train you, I think that's a great idea.
Are there any other organizations that you might recommend?
That's going to get into this?
Toastmasters is a really, really good venue. I also think that you can read books about it and you can train yourself. It's something where practice makes a difference. And most people can be a pretty good speaker. But Toastmasters is the only one that I'm aware of.
The Andrew Carnegie course.
Okay. His books are great. I've never taken any seminars.
Yeah.
National Speakers Association actually does trains people.
Okay.
There's a local chapter.
Okay, great. That's a good suggestion. Any other questions, comments? Yep.
What's an example of a business development forum?
Business development forum would be areas where entrepreneurs are coming together, like CEOs from startups. In other words, it would be a broad group of CEOs looking to learn more about business activities, as opposed to a functional area. So we have examples, let's see, in California, you probably have them too. It would be things like the MIT Venture Lab. So, basically where CEOs gather. That's what I meant by that. So this is, I'll circulate or put this chart up as part of the materials that we'll make available to all of you. But I did this in 2 hours. So I did basically by using a search engine, mostly in the Bay Area, I identified almost 20 speaking opportunities in 2 hours. So IEEE has 3, Consulting Network, Silicon Valley, Technology Management, and the Consumer Electronics Society. ACM, SFBA ACM, SIGGRAPH, Silicon Valley, SIG-CHI. They've got 2, I guess, SIGGRAPH chapters. PDMA, this is important to me, Product Development Management Association, may be irrelevant to you. PMI, Project Management Institute. MIT has a couple of venues. American Marketing Association had a couple. Society of Manufacturing Engineers is a Vice President of Engineering, CTO, Community Practice. Management Roundtable puts on product development related seminars. IIR is a conference and seminar producer located in New York. They do seminars all the time. Institute for International Research, the Conference Board. There also you can do education. So I've looked at societies, what I've called C-level organizations and educational institutions. These are all examples of venues you can speak. And Russ Brahmi, who received our award, puts on talks here. Russ, how many people call you?
None.
None. Isn't it hard sometimes to get speakers?
The rejection rate is about 80%.
Okay. Russ is typical of people that run speakers programs for professional organizations. They're always looking for speakers. So if you can come on with a great topic, have something to say, people really are receptive for you getting out there. They love to get your calls. You may not get in every one, and you know, these societies may not make sense for you. You're going to have to figure out what your target list is, but this is definitely an area, and they would like to hear from you.
University departments are looking for outside speakers.
You bet.
Different from that kind of.
It is. And I've done sessions at Case Western and NGI, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Just people call you because they'd like you to come in for a class. The problem is it isn't really a target-rich environment. You'd like to talk. Yeah, give them 5 years. I'm a little less patient than that. But it is a good venue. It is a good venue. So this is one really important area, which is need to identify your service area. What is it that you're really good about, really passionate about, really know something about, have developed the proprietary methodology? Having lessons learned, benchmark data is really good. Like if you've talked to people and know, particular, like the ratio of usability engineers to software engineers can supply metrics and real analytical data that people are hungry for. In lessons learned, that's always very valuable. Come up with non-obvious conclusions. So this is what you can do, but you have to map what you can do to the zeitgeist, the spirit of the times. What's really important? What's selling right now? When I started the consulting firm, what was really important was that Japanese were beating the pants off of us in consumer electronics. And so that was important, and benchmarking was really important. So I took the sign of the times, benchmarking and Japanese product development, and then developed a list of topics that really went into that particular area. So think about what's really hot right now, as was said, what are pain points right now, and then where are some areas that you really have something to say. What are our metrics? These were our metrics. So one was 3 leads per speech and 1 job per speech. That's what we targeted. And then, as I mentioned, there are about 7 of us who are doing consulting. The rule of the firm was 1 placement per principal per month. So if I told you I was doing about 10 hours a week, 40 hours a month would be working to do 1 placement. PR, a talk, or an article. So this was our metric. Speaking, print, or PR. With speaking be the favorite means. This is a piece of data. I'm going to wrap up in just a minute here. This shows the source of leads by frequency over several years. Nearly 40% of our leads came from follow-on work. Your best clients are your former clients. And this goes back to the talk where we went after Fortune 500 companies. They have divisions. So if you do a great job in one division, have the person you did the work for call their peer in another division and have them talk about you. They'd be happy to do it if you did a good job. The other is internal. So this is follow-on where you just did project A and project B for the same person. This is what I was referring to, client referral, internal, one division to another division. You add these 2 bars, that's 25 and 35. You're at 60% of our job was repeat business. Conferences was the way that we developed new businesses, and I was saying conferences were more effective than seminars. And then external clients, so you can have one client from one company refer you to another client from another organization. And don't be shy. Ask clients to see if they could recommend someone in another company. And then we got some work from newsletter. These professional meetings and colleague referrals did not work for us. A professional meeting means attending a professional meeting and networking. It's a waste of time. Go ahead.
I can personally say that being involved in BostonCHI has directly resulted in a number of
Good. Well, and that's a good point. This is a way, not the way.
You said these numbers
represent where you were after about 6 years. How long did it take you to get to the point where the bulk of your business was repeat business?
About 3 or 4 years, something like that. It takes a while. You know, our projects are 1 or 2 years in duration. This is a really great book. It's called Managing the Professional Service Firm by David Maister. He's a Harvard business professor. Great book, really great book. And you know, he basically indicates that these are what he'd call clutching at straws tactics, and I tend to agree. Finally, many of you may have heard of the 4 Ps in marketing: placement, price, product, and promotion. So in consulting, it's pick your placement. Are you a consultant or a contractor? Develop your product. What is your practice area and speaking topics? What do you really have that's going to make you differentiable? Relentlessly promote speaking. I would give the same talk 20 times. If it's a good talk and really is something to say, it'd be different audiences, of course. Yeah, but it would, if you've got something that works well, yeah, really slow ones, exactly.
Next month, we've got
Exactly, yeah. Since you didn't get it this time, it's Groundhog Day. Determine your pricing, manage with metrics, and then track the lead sources, modify the process, and have fun doing it. So anyway, that's my presentation. Are there any questions?